up, 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 up. Sorry about that. Using a bit of my secret sauce. Sorry about this. All right. Yes, I do use Canva, as you can see. And they changed the buttons, but I find that things are righty. All right. So with Breezeway, Kinesis, and Touchday, we shall be talking about these topics today. How to make short-term rental management daily operations pain-free, and basically see how we can do that. As I said, I will give like a short introduction. Bear with me, it's like 2 minutes, but just like some data, what's happening. And then we cover with our speakers topics like, how to solve the rising cost, inflation things on the staff side, how to automate to reduce costs and maybe increase revenues. We do a reality check here. Super interesting. And I'm counting on my speakers to tell really how it is. We talk about inflating the guest expectation, right? This inflation is also about what the guests are expecting now at the sky high. Also, the expectations that we have as property managers about guests, are they the right ones, the wrong ones? Homeowners as well, homeowners, there's also a cost issue here. How do you talk to them about these costs? So how do you help them reduce the costs? So very important as well. Last thing, we talk about the P&L angle, right? How again, reducing costs may have a lot of this is a topic that's with the P&L angle, topics like, even thinking about software pricing, the vendors you're using. How can you again look at this from a operational viewpoint and reduce the cost of your scaling business, for example? As I said, we're gonna have today, oh yeah, who am I? I'm Thibault from Rental Scale Up. I'm the founder of Rental Scale Up. We have a free weekly newsletter. We have a network called skillersnetwork.com, and we also do consulting for the industry. So very happy that we have directors of sales, CEOs who have accepted to help you today. We have from Breezeway, Matt Barr, his director of sales. We have from KeyNest, Florian Hoven, co-founder of the company. And Touchday, we have Andy McNulty, he's a CEO, co-founder. I shall stop sharing my screen and have them introduce themselves because it's just better in person. All right. First, Matt, do you want to have a few words to tell us what you do, what Breezeway is about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. My name is Matt Barr. I'm the director of sales at Breezeway. For those of you who do not know, Breezeway is a property operations and guest messaging platform. So we help vacation rental managers coordinate all the many moving pieces that go into cleaning, inspection, maintenance, and all the communication that goes around that. I've been fortunate enough to speak with thousands of managers for the last 3 years about operations. I think this is a super important topic. As more and more money is poured into the industry, guest expectations, owner expectations are going to continue to rise. So a lot of responsibility, but it's also, a great opportunity to see a lot of success. So excited to talk about some best practices, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Matt. Florian, how about KeyNest?
Sure. Hi again as well. And yeah, thanks for organizing, and very excited for this discussion really. So KeyNest, effectively, we're a network of 5,000 or 6,000 locations around the globe, where short-term rental hosts, property managers can securely store their keys and then give access to guests, to cleaners, contractors, or whoever they want to give remote access to. And the question of becoming operationally more efficient has been really at the forefront of KeyNest since the beginning, since we started 6 or 7 years ago now. Because as people want to scale, it's important to be sure and make sure that the operations are run in the most efficient way.
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry. Andy, how about Touchday, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Andy from Touchday. As Thibault kindly introduced me, I'm the CEO and co-founder. For those of you who don't know what Touchday does, very simple. It's a digital version of the house manual, the paper manual, the PDF, the Word doc that you all know and love, or maybe know and hate. I hate it as a guest. And that's the perspective that I bring today as a guest. I'm not an operator. I haven't run your kind of businesses, but I do know what it's like as a guest. And I think there's some really important points here about thinking about cutting costs and the guest experience. I'll talk about that. But also, prior to Touchday, I spent 15 years as a business consultant and working in luxury fashion. So I do bring an outside this world perspective too. And I was a CFO in those days, so I can also bring you some good hard CFO P&L perspective on today's conversation.
Fantastic, and this is exactly what we'll be getting for the last chapter, the CFO angle. But without just starting, also we did promise to attendees a few discounts and deals from each of the company. Again, you'll get right after the session, you get an email with all this really well detailed. But I just want to mention that, so so you know what to expect in the email after the session. So Breezeway is actually you guys, thanks to Matt, give implementation free of charge for Breezeway's property care operations messaging platform. So we'll tell you in the email how to redeem it in how did you hear about us field. Or even to mention to us as executive. KeyNest, 50% discount on the first month using KeyNest key storage, using the code rental scale up. Again, see the email for more information. Touchday, so people have access for free to the welcome book for 14 days, and the setup is free as well. You will, as a property manager, you will be in contact with the ND, actually, who's here, and to make sure we know how many properties you have, and it will help you as well set up your guidebooks. Again, all the details are in the email. So why are we here? We're here, why is the time now? Well, as I said as a formal introduction, inflation is really high in the US, as we know, right? Inflation in the US accelerated to 8.5% in March 2022, 8.5%. That's the highest since December 1981. Obviously, same month of March, energy prices increased by 32% and gasoline by 48%, for example. So why does it matter to us? Obviously it matters in terms of operations because, for example, gasoline, let's think about gas, right? If we have staff, cleaners, or staff driving from a vacation rental to another, to I don't know, from welcoming guests to cleaning properties or fixing something at a property, and you pay for the gas expenses of your staff, you may have noticed an increase, right? You may also think about inflation has an impact on even the ADRs, right? Last 2 years, the ADRs were really high thanks to the boom we had in our industry, which is fantastic. But now maybe the prices are rising as well because the cost base is increased. So how to face that? We're going to be talking as well about inflation and guest expectations, right? Guests expect more flexibility, better communication, better amenities, toiletries. Wow, that's a lot of increased costs for us. And last thing I said, also labor shortages. When it comes to labor shortages, like hospitality is the industry where the labor shortage is the biggest in the US. So that's clearly us again. So let's go through the first few angles here to see how we can solve that for operation, and operational efficiency more than ever is important. First, let's talk about staff, and there's a few things we can do around staff, and there's different angles, right? You can think about externalizing your staff, reducing your staff, or actually investing in your staff. These are very different angles we can talk about today. And maybe, Matt, do you want to get started and we'll talk about these different angles, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start by kind of setting the scene a little bit in terms of what we're seeing on how people are actually staffing their teams. So we wrote an annual survey. I think we had, just shy of 2,000 respondents this year. And what we found out was 15% of companies in the industry are using all internal staff. So all internal cleaning, inspection, maintenance folks. 43% were using a mix of some internal, some external staff, some outside contractors. I think those folks typically start with, an in-house maintenance person or an in-house inspector, typically, using an outside contractor for cleaning. And then 42% of folks are using all external staff, which I think is, a little surprising to me, really interesting. And there's obviously pros and cons to both. Obviously, with internal staff, you have a little bit more control around brand standards. You have a little bit more control around responsibility, but there's, a little bit of a financial responsibility there. And then, terms of like getting into the summer busy season, relying on some external staff to add to your team internally. Moving forward to actually setting up your staff for success. I know obviously staffing is extremely difficult. We're seeing it in every market. So I think there's a couple of things that we can do to help retain teams. The first one is around brand standards, right? I think everyone in any job that they've worked really wants to understand what is expected of them and how they can deliver against those expectations. So we're seeing things like cleaning and inspection checklists, making it really easy for cleaners, inspectors to understand what your brand standard is, providing photos for them to understand what the property should look like after they're done, and then giving them the opportunity to potentially, take photos of the property after they go through, so that they can show, this is the work that I'm doing, adds a little bit of pride in the work. It can certainly help with employee satisfaction and retention as well.
Thank you, Matt. And so we have an option, which is keeping the staff. Another way could be also to look at your value chain and say, where can we maybe reduce some tasks that need staff? And I think, Florian, from KeyNest, you can maybe help us out here.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's not necessarily about, getting rid of colleagues, but it's more about, as you said, making sure the staff that you have works in the most productive way. So there's a couple of examples which, a lot of property managers have done back in the day, not doing so more anymore for obvious reasons. For example, having people running around the city, trying to be on time to meet guests arriving, and then waiting at the property because the guest is actually 3 hours late, is not a good and efficient use of your staff time. Similarly, having 1 or 2 people in the office trying to coordinate cleaners or trying to book contractors for jobs, for ad hoc work, for example. There's also, great pieces of software that help you manage all of that, so that basically one person can do the job of 2 or 3, which helps redeploying someone else doing something which actually is value creating, is helping you to scale further, to take on another 10 or 20 properties. And I think it's really important, especially in these times, to really look at that and to maximize productivity.
So I really like the point we said, right? Because obviously operational efficiency is not just about, getting rid of people, which is a way to say it, right? And another way we hear, I'm also intrigued to hear about, we said, automation is a way to reduce costs. And sometimes also here, automation is a way to reduce costs and to increase revenues. So I really love to have your views about this, because some of your solutions seem really to, offer these possibilities. But again, maybe starting again with Matt, right? As like we talk about automation, obviously Breezeway is a lot about automation. So how do you view these things about automating for reduced costs and increasing revenues? How do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I dive in there, I actually might make just one more point to the staffing piece, because I do think it's just such a big issue today. And it's around incentivizing staff. So I don't know if anyone on the call today is actually providing incentives for 5-star reviews, but we are seeing a lot of managers see success with that. It reduces callbacks, increases to 5-star reviews, and those are obviously both money makers for you. You have this one opportunity. Unfortunately, you only get one opportunity to create a great first impression with your guests when they open that door after their 7-hour flight, their 5-hour drive. And that property better look exactly as advertised. So providing a little bit extra incentive for staff who do create that great guest experience, and even sharing some of the great reviews that you got, really provides, again, employee satisfaction, a lot of pride in their work. So I just wanted to mention that quickly around staffing.
Very interesting point. Just quickly to interrupt you there, just because I so agree with that point. I think Uber, without their review system, wouldn't have disrupted this in their industry so much. If not every driver, and nearly every driver, tries their best to get the 5-star. So I think you're raising actually a super good point there, which is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can dive into your next question around reducing costs and potentially increasing revenue. We were talking before this call, obviously the increasing revenue is a little bit sexier, but I do think there's probably more opportunity for a lot of folks' operations in the reducing cost piece. And what we typically tell, clients or prospects is to just really lay out your entire process and your entire framework. There's probably 1,000 touch points that happen with each guest turnover, right? All the guest communication that goes into it, all the different cleaning touch points, the inspection touch points, all the internal communication. There's a lot of moving pieces here. And if you're able to lay that out on a whiteboard, for example, find the low hanging fruit, find the couple pieces about your process that, really stinks to do every day and is really manual, and provide some automation there to free up your human capital to actually provide, what humans are best at is, creating great guest experiences. And a couple examples there are, triggers around reservations. So when you get a new reservation or a reservation changes, how are you creating a clean? Is that manual? Is there some sort of automation there to let the cleaners know, to let the outside cleaning company know? When a cleaner finishes a clean, does the inspector know that immediately, or do they need to call and find out where the cleaner is? Some small triggers like that can really increase efficiency and cut down a lot of the manual communication day to day. I'll let Andy and Florian to jump in as well, and I can talk about increased revenues afterwards.
Yeah, I think, Matt, that this is a subject which I kind of love. This should we chase the revenue? Like, should we upsell guests? And as a guest point of principle, I kind of dislike that anyway. But I think it also creates work. You have to deliver. If you want to try and make more money from a guest, A, you've got to figure out how you're going to do that. B, when the guest decides to buy, you've then got to figure out how you fulfill it. And with this context of rising ADRs and occupancy, and I know not everybody has had a great couple of years, but those who are in drive-to destinations have typically had very good years, record years. Many of our customers, in fact, any customer I talk to in the drive-to destinations had record years. I don't think chasing the extra revenue is the right call to make at this point. I think the best focus is on how you can make your business more efficient, how you can make your P&L more efficient. And Matt talked about it there. How do you make sure that the process of turnovers is streamlined, etc.? That's where I would focus the attention. I wouldn't go anywhere near this kind of shining light, this great thing about. I've yet to come across a customer of ours that has successfully implemented significantly increased revenues from upselling, etc. So I would definitely focus on that. I would say also that communicating better to the guest is one of those things that will have a massive impact on the mental bandwidth that you have to try and manage. You know what it's like when you're busy, and then you get questions from people throughout your day. It's hard to adjust and put your mind into that mode. And it's the same with guests. I'm sure you get repeat questions from guests over and over again. And it's not because the guest doesn't read. Like, this is another one of my favorite subjects, that when I hear guests don't read, I'm here to say they do read. Guests do read. Why don't they read? Because you haven't told them why it's important for them to read it, and you haven't repeated yourself. And this is something that I was told once: never be afraid to repeat yourself, Andy. And so I've taken that really literally, and I would say you all should as well. Don't be afraid of telling that guest 5 times, 6 times. They won't hear it the first 3 or 4 times because they've stepped out their front door, they've got vacation brain on, they've left. And if you can sequence your communications using a tool like Breezeway, for example, so that you've got a series of communications that are happening automatically behind the scenes without you having to intervene, repeating yourself for you, and doing it at the right moments, like consider where the guest is in their journey. 24 hours prior to arrival is definitely a nice moment to hit them with, don't forget your arrival instructions. And that repetition, it will go into the guests. It will, I promise you. We do read eventually. We want to know how to get into the home, and we'll read it. But let your system do that. That's what I would say. So in summary, I would say don't go near that revenue chasing. I think it's the wrong moment to do that. I would focus on how you streamline what you're doing.
Andy,
I 100%.
okay.
Go ahead.
Matt,
Okay,
go,
let me. just 100% second that, both of your points really, and that's why this topic is so important. You don't want to fall into the trap of becoming, sort of a low-cost airline, selling cheap tickets and then trying to upsell the insurance and trying to upsell million services, which leaves a bitter taste, right? And especially, it's better to become better and then offering a better service and being able to then charge the prices that most of us of if you can, rather than becoming someone that constantly chases the guests for buying something or going into something which they might not want to, just because you get a little bit of commission on the side. First of all, as Andy said, I don't think that works, and second of all, the guests will not appreciate that.
Yeah,
Andy. Oh, Matt, go ahead. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple points just to follow up. I totally agree with Andy about, I think there is definitely more opportunity to reduce costs around operations in the industry. I love your point about being proactive with communication as well. I'm sure there's probably a list of 10 questions you can think of on your top of your head. Like, these are the standard 10 questions I always get from guests. Start to include that in your automated communication and try and cut down on some of the manual texts, calls, emails that you're receiving from guests. And then just to kind of take the other side of the table and talk about increasing revenue, there is one kind of channel that we've seen our customers have great success with. And again, it's not a bunch of upsells. It's not blowing them up with different opportunities, but it's around gap nights. So if you do have a break in reservations, you do have, a one-night gap, a two-night gap that might not be filled by an additional reservation, automating a message to the party that's in your property, as well as the party that might be checking in a couple of days, and say, hey, this property is open a couple of days after you check out. Want to extend your stay for a 10% discount? We're actually seeing a 7 or 8% conversion rate on some of those messages. And again, it's not too pushy. It's just an extended vacation. And it's a great touch point that increases revenue.
I think Matt as well, that's timed perfectly in this scenario, in this world where we do have a bit more flexibility to work wherever we are. And I think there's a lot more of that that's going on than we really realize. From my sort of historical background, it's always been there's a place for work and then there's a place for vacation. I think that line is definitely blurred. And I suspect that's a reason why there's a 7 or 8% uptick, or at least conversion on offering those gap nights.
Yeah, it's definitely a gray area now. And then definitely, more successful in drive markets, obviously. And then, I'm an impulsive buyer. So if I get a text like that, I'm on vacation. I'll probably stay another night.
Speaking of buying and being impulsive buying, maybe a barrier you may have now is that ADRs are very high in a way, right? It was super easy to be impulsive, especially last few years, where after some lockdowns, like I just want to go somewhere. But now after 2 years, I think ADRs are pretty high, and I think Andy, you started touching upon this, right? The inflation of ADRs, and because there's a downside to this, which is like, can I have to deliver over these prices? Because I think in some locations now, basically, people think twice. Like, what? Hotels may not be that much more expensive than vacation rentals in some areas, right? So how do you justify this? And again, how can operational efficiency, how can it help justify this increase in ADRs?
It's an extension of what I was saying just now, where I appreciate not everybody is fortunate enough to have had some good years, and there may be people on this call that have had really bad years, and they're actually here for us to tell them how to cut their costs. And I might touch on a bit of that later, but I'm definitely a fan of, there's been a boom couple of years, and most people are not in this to sell their business in the next 6 months or the next year. So in that context where you have had very good years, I'm going to say the counter. I'm going to say, I would suggest trying to invest a little bit more in your business. And that will stand you and put you in a really good, strong position over the medium term and the longer term. It would be a bad idea to make, very quick knee-jerk reactions. I've seen this in business life. People see something bad coming, they cut. And it takes much longer to come out of that afterwards. I'm not saying don't cut. like if your business is in tricky territory and you are between black and red, you're on that break-even line, then of course action is needed. But I would say the majority of our customers and the market generally have had really bumpy years and who are probably making very nice returns. Put that money back. You know, there's a much higher guest expectation now because the ADR rate of this sector is now no longer what it was a couple of years ago, meaning this sector is no longer the slightly more, I don't want to say cheap, but the slightly more affordable option versus the hotel. That playing field is definitely leveling. And with that, also, we've got the strong awareness that Airbnb has driven into this market. And lots of people trying vacation rentals over the last couple of years through the COVID as well. And they come from an environment where they know what they're going to get when they turn up to the Hilton or the Marriott. They know, like, it might be a blander experience, but they know what they're going to get. And if we now have a much higher ADR, I think you'll find that guests come with much higher expectations. I do, by the way. So I was looking at booking a stay for my family this August in Key West. Key West is a place we love to go, and unfortunately have to be able to travel. But 3 years ago, in fact, prior to the lockdown, the place we stayed at is now charging 50% more per night. And I was just floored. You know, I just thought, how can this be? And suddenly as a guest, I'm now looking not at that place, and it's a vacation rental, but other equivalent forms of accommodation. So already in my mind, I'm seeing that reality that it's no longer a cheap alternative. So I would reinvest where possible back into the things that really make you unique. Like, what is it that is really great about staying with you? Really amp that up and put some money behind that. Don't go cutting unless you're right at the margins and you need to cut.
So there's clearly, you know, in terms of expectations, so there's inflation as well. Inflation, not just the prices, but also inflation in the what guests expecting nowadays, right? Talk about more amenities, toiletries, a lot of things, and there's also expectation around flexibility. I think, Florian, right? People are expecting some more service, and not just flexibility in terms of cancellation policy, right? But flexibility as well in terms of operations, right?
No, absolutely. Andy touched on that already. I think when I first struggled with Airbnb, I don't know when it was, maybe 2014 or so, maybe 13, but the expectation wasn't the same. You got a place which looked quite nice on the photos, and then you expected to have a few communication issues potentially, but you didn't expect to have the same service as a hotel would give to you. And over the years, with the prices increasing also for short-term rental, I'm also the same as Andy said. Now my expectation is very high, so I would not accept or would not like it anymore when I book somewhere and they say, oh, you need to tell us when exactly you're at the property, because that's how we need to greet you and give you the keys. And then my flight is delayed and I'm very stressed because I might be 2 hours late, or actually, the flip side, I'm early and then I have to wait there in the rain for someone to show up in 2 hours. And that would never happen with a hotel. And it's an expectation of a guest, that everything goes as seamless as in a hotel. The check-in, you go there to the property or, close by, and you can do the check-in whenever you arrive. And I think that's super important. Whatever the hotels still can do better, are doing better, it's an area that's worth investing in for the vacation rentals. So cutting costs there everywhere isn't the solution. You could also decide to, hide the key, for example, somewhere in the garden, and hopefully the guest finds it. That's for free. But it's definitely not the right approach, and cutting costs there is not a good idea. So it definitely comes within limits.
Matt, there's also something else happening about guest expectation. I think Florian talked about this, but also there's also in terms of communications, things are changing, right? The guests are expecting more flexibility, but also they're expecting maybe different channels to communicate with them and get information.
Yeah, absolutely. The guest communication piece, I think, is huge. And I think it comes back to being really proactive and making it as easy as possible for the guests. So, historically sending email updates, might not be the best way today. Folks are, again, on vacation mode. And the primary communication today is through text message. So we've seen folks have a lot of success with really proactive texting. And a couple of those examples are, one, property readiness. So when you understand that the property is ready, automating a text out to the guests. I was in North Carolina this past 2 days, and I went to a coffee shop at 1 o'clock to wait for my 4 p.m. check-in. And if I had gotten a text at 2:30 that your property's ready, that creates a great first impression with the guest. Another one that I think is underrated is a message or a text right after check-in. So either that night or potentially the next morning, and asking the guests, hey, is this property exactly as advertised? And you're really inviting them to tell you something wrong, right? Like, you much rather get an issue on day 2 than get an issue on day 8 after they've checked out and it comes through as a bad review. And if you get that issue on day 2 and you're proactive and you fix it, it's probably going to create a better experience for the guests than if there wasn't an issue. And then, if issues do arise and guests, text in, my stove's not working, for example, providing some proactive communication around that, saying, hey, we've created an issue here. Hey, the maintenance person has started this job. Hey, this is completed. And again, trying to provide some automation there to take some of the manual communication away from your team.
Thank you, Matt. So that's, we talked about guest expectations changing, inflation, but as well, we, as property managers, property owners, or people in the industry, also have expectations about the guests, right? Which also very interesting to talk about, I think. And I think indeed you talked about that earlier already, right? In the sense that it's not about sending, people shouldn't be afraid of repeating themselves. Property managers should really make sure the message gets through, whether it is. And then there's so this notion that you have to do this, but how do you do this at scale? When I'm talking about, for example, if you do have to send the right communication to the same people, if you have 50 properties, how can you do this at scale? That's something I would love you to talk about, maybe, because for property managers, obviously, managers is probably very important.
Yeah, I think it's a lot around what Matt was saying. Is that you can end up redeploying resource in other parts of your business if you're able to automate things that are broken. If you've got somebody that's spending too long on managing that guest or answering those repeat guest questions, then you need a process that gets those questions. Thibault, am I coming through okay? Because my internet connection is unstable. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Great. Yeah, if those processes are broken and you're using people to fix those processes, that there is an inefficiency in your P&L, and you may not cut that person or that team that is managing that inefficient process by moving to a technical process, but you'll be able to redeploy those in other parts of the business that have more impact. And that I'm sure you've got a ton of places you could put people that would make a better business. And so one of those things is about making sure you're not getting that guest asking the same thing over and over and over again. And sometimes it's like we're all like it, aren't we? We know there's something broken in what we do, but we continue to just like plug the hole and manually do something to overcome that shortcoming. Whereas if you take a time out on the process and actually document how it should work and then put in place a technical solution to make it work, then you generate that efficiency in the business. And I think if you end up doing that and giving the guests those questions that they need answering at the right time, then you will end up having a more efficient business. And then you can take the decision about, do I then cut that team or cut that person because I've now got this tech process doing it? Or do I move that team or that process into something that is going to, perhaps you're not using dynamic pricing right now and you haven't adjusted your rates. Well, now you can go focus on that because there is room to increase the rates. Like I said earlier, everybody's doing it. So if you haven't been doing it, definitely look at it. But equally, you could move it into making the guest experience even better. Those people that were fielding those really annoying repeat questions or attending to that broken process can now go and deliver on improving the guest experience, delivering a better service in the property to justify that higher revenue that many of you are now charging.
Thank you, Andy. So we talk about guest expectations, because from the guests, our expectations of guests as well. how about the homeowner side, right? We can't have an event for property managers while talking about the homeowner side, right? We dealing with both sides. And I'm just going to go with an example, right? I was working recently in a project with a property manager, and the issue they had is that they had, quite a few properties, and they had a maintenance team. The maintenance team, sometimes would drive to Home Depot and buy light bulbs and different things that need to be fixed. And then they would just go to the properties and fix what needed to be fixed, from toilet seats to the light bulbs, everything. But then the expenses were not properly allocated. Like, we fixed at property A, so that should be charged to the owner of property A. The system was not there. So things were fixed. The guest experience was amazing. But at the end of the month, there were some bills left here that they didn't know who to allocate to. So in the end, this property manager basically had to just cover this for themselves, which is like crazy to think about it. But we also busy in this business, right? So, and I think obviously I'm putting to Matt for Breezeway, right? It's this whole notion of the homeowner side of costs. There's costs need to be allocated. And at some point you need to also, as a property manager, do your job and show that you just not reducing costs, but you're also delivering value. So what's your view on that, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great topic, and I think it gets overlooked sometimes with a huge focus on creating great guest experiences. We do have this other client in the homeowner, and depending on your agreement with the homeowner, this could be a very big revenue driver for you. And what I mean by that is, I'll start and set the scene a little bit. Part of our survey as well was homeowners are typically only aware of 20% of the work that's actually happening at their property, which is kind of mind blowing, right? They're paying a percentage of revenue and they don't really understand the full service that they're getting. So it's super important to be able to, share that story with them. And I think why that's so difficult is obviously there's so many moving pieces. There's last minute issues that pop up. There's last minute reservations that get changed or get canceled. With all this moving pieces, it's easy to just go fix something really quick and not actually document what's going on. So being able to document every task that happens, every touch point that you have with an owner's property, exactly how long that task took, what costs were associated with that, what supplies were used with that job, and being able to look at reports, one, to understand, your own expenses internally, but secondly, being able to bill homeowners back for that stuff. Again, it's like if it's done on a piece of paper and it gets lost, that's lost revenue that you could potentially bill back for. And that's just, that's understanding all the work that's going on at a property. There's another level to this where there's levels to this stuff where actually understanding down to the specific assets in the home as well. So for example, an issue comes up about a refrigerator. I felt like we just worked on that refrigerator last week, but I actually have no idea or no task history about it. And if you potentially need to go to a homeowner, Mrs. or Mrs. Homeowner, we need to replace your refrigerator, it makes that conversation a lot easier if you can say, we actually worked on this refrigerator 6 times in the last year. We only billed you twice for it. And here's the task history around that asset. So diving really deeper into task history, understanding what's going on at each property, how much you're spending, and then being able to bill back for some of that revenue.
And Matt, do you think this value for property managers when in giving advice to a homeowner on how to reduce costs of running their property, right, which is a business as well? Because I'm just thinking about your example here, right? Obviously, if you know that the fridge has been fixed over and over again, it's time to change it. So overall, do you think? I think it's so probably there's like more value that you can deliver and show to an owner here, right?
Well, I think there's 2 pieces there. I think you can start to be more proactive. We talk about proactive communication, but more proactive with inspections and preventative maintenance. Try and get ahead of some of these issues versus being reactive that, the fridge is broken. If you're inspecting the property, if you're ensuring that it's safe, if you're ensuring that assets are up to date, you're going to run into less costs there. But I think less about, reducing costs and more about projecting the value that you're delivering to homeowners. being able to communicate all the work that you're doing really leads to better homeowner retention, homeowner referrals, and therefore for more revenue for your company.
Yeah, Matt, I think given the context of all of this, like high ADR and bumper years for owners, the challenge is definitely that the owner should not necessarily expect this to continue forever. Instead of, like you said, instead of waiting to the last minute to recap the year for them, you need to do it much earlier. Like nobody likes surprises, do they? So, kind of get the communication done early as possible.
Absolutely.
And these are about communication, and rightly so. It's all about the business idea. And Florian, I want to turn to you now, because as well, the same things about the homeowners, right? There's costs, and sometimes actually costs of adopting or using some solutions, right? And I think KeyNest, for example, is very interesting in terms of cost of adoption for a homeowner, for example.
Yeah, it's a very interesting angle to look at it. And you're quite right, all three of you. We tend to sometimes look too much on the guest side and forget about the homeowner side. We've seen examples of now customers of ours, but before working with homeowners and at all costs wanting to install a smart lock, for example, and then when they sent an engineer or contractor to install it, they realized, oh, there's no Wi-Fi available, it didn't work, or the communal door, they actually can't put it. So the costs spiraled out of control just because there wasn't proper communication or inspection before taking on the property, and basically being happy on about having a new flat, having a new property, and putting it on the market as soon as possible, and then wasting hundreds, if not thousands of dollars because it wasn't properly set up from the beginning, which then leads to a delay in putting it, on the different channels and the OTAs, which is a big problem. And yeah, for sure, for us, which helps a lot then is being able to work with homeowners or property managers for them with whatever setup they have. Whether they have a fob to get into the building or a key or whatever it is, there's zero startup costs, which always helps, right? No one likes to put money or a lot of money up front and then hoping to make it back.
Thank you, Florian. And now for the last topic before we do a Q&A. The last topic we had is we touched upon this, when Andy introduced himself, that he was, really good at looking at P&Ls and helping also property managers think, have a P&L angle when looking at costs, for example, and how to think about costs. I know software costs, for example, right? Versus for growing business, how to think about this and how to think of details, contractual details may not be important. But again, these are sources of costs because we have costs from guests, we have costs from homeowner's side, but from also software costs, for example, right? So how do you think through that in terms of cost reduction, for example, Andy?
I hope this final subject, when someone starts talking about P&L and things like this, doesn't send like everybody hitting the exit button, leaving the webinar. But it is actually one of the most important things. It's like the foundation of your business, isn't it? We're all here to make our business successful and profitable. And hopefully most of you know what percentage earnings you're making in your P&L, like what is the percentage of profit on turnover. Hopefully you know that, and if you don't, I would definitely get your accountant or a finance person to look at that, because unless you know that, you can't take any decisions, and it's relative as well. So you may be making 10% margins, which means you made 100 profit on 1,000 revenue, but you may last year have made 5, and so this year is a better year. But now you're starting to talk about cutting costs. It's probably the wrong thing to do because you're in a relatively better year. You're making more money. So I think you need to know what that starting point is. Second thing I'm here to say is that if you're making 20% P&L profits, you're doing exceptionally well. Even if you're making 10, 15, you're still doing very, very well as well. In all of my past business lives, and I've seen a lot of businesses, 20% returns is a very, very healthy business. And I would guess there's a lot of property managers out there who are at that level. I'd be surprised if there are many property managers who are at that very low single-digit percentage return on their P&L. So that's what I would challenge you to do, is to start with that. And if you're up at those better levels, and I would say 10% plus, you're doing quite nicely. I wouldn't be so quick to go and get the knife out and start red penning and cutting things. I would think more about how you reinvest that for better longer term business. And so the other thing you can do with the P&L is to think about the cost base. Are you paying costs that are a percentage of your revenue, or are you paying fixed costs? And I think this is the point Thibault was getting at when he introduced me, was that if I've got a software which I'm paying a percentage of revenue for, then every time I grow my revenue, of course, I'm growing my costs at the same time. And that doesn't make the best financial sense. What you want to try and do to get that percentage of profitability up is to have a relatively fixed cost of your core products whilst your revenue is growing. It's leveraging your P&L is what's called it. So if you can flip some of your software products that are percentage of revenue models into fixed models, I would definitely look at that. And there are lots of property management systems out there that do charge fixed subscription prices. And if you're on a percentage one, it may be a great PMS and you may love it, and that therefore wouldn't be the right thing to change, but definitely challenge yourself and look at that. That's definitely one of the strong things I would do.
Thank you, Andy. And now we moving to the time-wise, we're perfectly aligned. It's perfect, fantastic. The Q&A side is already, so do write your questions in the chat. I see there's always been a question, and I think Andy, you actually answered it. I want to repeat that question out loud so we can give the answer to everybody. Everybody can benefit from that. So it was a question from Paula, and she was asking, would you recommend preparing a Q&A to help reduce repeat questions? So Andy, what was your answer?
Yeah, my response basically boils down to what's in it for the guest. You know, the guest, before, we all want to know why we should open an email in our inbox. Text less so, Matt, I take it. Definitely people open text. But communications as a rule, we tend to look at things and go, do I need to look at that? No, I'll come back to that. And then we forget about it. So you need to make sure that it's very clear what's in it for the guest. So definitely have a Q&A and have lots of Q&A stuff in there. But the way to surface that to the guest is to say to the guest, we've got this great document that's going to answer all your questions, including the following 3, bullet, 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 and make those 3 the most frequently asked questions you get, because then the guest instantly understands this document is valuable. And once they're in that document and they see all the other answers to the questions, you'll find that the number of questions you get reduces. So it's all about how to put it in a way that is what's in it for me, for the guest.
And I'll quickly double down just so, you know, we'll make Andy make the pitch, but Touchday is a fantastic app to store all that information for your guests too. So.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Look at that. It's full of love here today. To save time, right? If you don't have time, guys, if you attend, you can turn your microphone on and just, ask a question, right? You need to type it. If you have a question, anyone, operational efficiency, reducing costs, guest side, homeowner side, operations, software, any pressing question you have or doubts, or something was not clear, do ask away, right? We really have these speakers for you. Just chime in. Just turn your microphone on and just chime in.
And I would definitely say, just to follow on Thibault, I'm quite aware that maybe we haven't said how to cut this and how to cut that and where to cut. So if there are any things that you're like, should I cut this? Or I've got this real practical question, I'd definitely like to know that, because I always feel like when I come on these that I want the attendees to go away like thinking they got something out of it. So if we've been too bland, tell us.
So I have a question about, we usually meet people at the door so we coordinate an arrival time to our property. So we meet people at the door and we show them around. Is that, and what we had heard from previous owners is that people tend to take better care of the property too if there's a face-to-face, as opposed to, like an automatic door lock system where people can just let themselves in, when they arrive, but there is no face-to-face. So is there, I know there's probably pros and cons to both of those things, but what would you recommend?
I might be a bit biased, of course, but we actually ran with quite a few of our customers pre-COVID and also post-COVID. And obviously the curve went up, but basically even pre-COVID, it was over 70% of the guests they asked afterwards. They prefer not needing to meet someone there. The first point was flexibility. As I said earlier, they were a bit stressed about being on time. Then it was a bit annoying when they were a bit early, they had to wait for someone to come. Or, you know, it can happen that someone who shows them around is a bit late because there's traffic or something like that happens, right? It's impossible to avoid. And that's the worst possible start to a vacation, having to wait outside for whatever reason. Post-COVID, this percentage, I think the latest figures we got was 87% did not want to be greeted. That obviously has this COVID element in it as well. And it depends a bit on the person. Again, I might be biased because, you know, we get a lot of customers coming to us and having done meet and greet, cutting costs with us and delivering the same service. But me personally as well, I don't really need someone showing me where the kitchen is. And I also like to kind of discover it myself. And if I go to properties where there is someone, you know, I'm nice, but at the end of a long journey, I just want to get in and put my things down, take a shower, and not having to wait there and then, you know, have a tour of the property.
And probably also would chime in, and, you know, I have properties in a luxury market, and we have to do meet and greet at the airport and take people to the high villa. So there's no, and all our competitors do that. So we have to, right? So it also kind of depends on your market area, I would say, right? So if it's the standard, like where I am, you have to drive people, wait for them at the airport, they miss their flight, you still have to wait and take them there because they pay a lot of money. So that's also the angle as well to see here, right? It's the and COVID has changed things, but also some expectations are still there in some markets. So it's up to you to decide, I think, as well. I hope it's helpful as an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody?
Marianne, how many properties do you have?
So we only have one property, and the thing is, ours is a little bit unique because the property is below our main house. So the property is a beach property that's, you know, it's on a point, and so there's a lot of privacy once they're down there. But so it's not like, so I'm usually there. So it's not like people have to wait an hour for me to get there or somebody to get there. You know, it's a 5-minute walk down to the beach property. So, and then there's some unique things about the house that, that are, I think, are helpful for people to know how things work. Just so I think it in some ways it avoids questions later. If I can show them around, it makes things a little bit more efficient for their time that they spend there too.
Yeah, I think you answered your question as well. I think in the case where you've got the one and you're on site and you're there, and it makes a lot of sense to keep doing what you're doing. I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. For my answer, I took a different case. I thought, you know, it might be difficult to coordinate. If it's easy to coordinate, and if it's not causing you too much of a headache and causing frustration in the guest, you know, it doesn't hurt. Maybe just try with 1 or 2 guests, you know, doing it a self check-in solution. And see how they like it, and you might find out actually you don't need to spend time and meeting them if people prefer it. But yeah, for sure, if it works for now and it doesn't cost you a headache, I would not risk making a major change for now.
And you know, and we have a lot of repeat customers too. So maybe for the repeat people, I don't need to do that every time. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And usually with those, I just give them a key and they can, you know, I don't need to meet them down there. But yeah.
Any last question we have from the attendees, and again, you have a few minutes to talk with these bright minds from Touchday and Breezeway and KeyNest.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I work with Touchday with Andy for, I think we started pre-COVID, and I love it. It's awesome. But the problem I see is that we have a lot of large homes, so groups are 10 people and up sometimes. And what I see is happening all the time, that the main contact might have the app, but all the others don't even look at the app, right? It's just like, and then you still get the same questions than before. It's kind of frustrating. So we try to make people understand, hey, remember, load it down, and we are in a Spanish-speaking country. So it's kind of difficult. So I'm really looking there for an idea of how to make people understand, hey, it's an app, everybody can load it down, it doesn't cost nothing, it doesn't take a lot of space. So, but that's really a problem we are seeing. I
would drop me a line, and we can talk about that separately. I've got a few ideas, but very quickly, I would say that there's a solution coming that will resolve that for you soon. So your party will be able to share it really easily. But put a QR code in your home as well, so that everyone can scan it. And also tell the lead party, tell them, just say, please share this, and like remind them. Keep telling them that.
Okay, no, we saw the QR code. We are going to do that. Actually, we're going to put it on every refrigerator out there.
Cool. Yeah, but email me, because I can talk to you about the thing that I have in mind that will help solve that.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
All right, we may have time for one more question anybody has. Really, like labor shortage or inflation costs, what to cut, what to do, any pricing question you have in mind, how we can help you solve, that'd be great. Nope. 1, 2, 3. Question from Emily in the chat. How do you find people to work? Good one. Go ahead. So who wants to answer? Anybody? Any tips you've seen from other property managers? Where do they find the staff? I did tips. We talk about retaining, investing in the people. How do you attract maybe new people? Any things you've seen working with other property managers? I'm asking the speakers.
I mean, I can talk about how I would approach it in Touchday in our world. I just think you might have to pay a bit more. I think you might have to do other things that the employees will value. I think these days employees value more than the paycheck. They value other things, whether it's being given an extra responsibility or having some kind of input into some of the things that you're changing, your processes, etc. Just like engaging the employee more in that. How to find good people? Yeah, I think it's a challenge. I don't have the answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, building a network in your community, you have to be really proactive. It takes a lot of effort. Unfortunately, there's no, I don't think there's any easy solution to doing that. But I think once you meet the right people, it's to what Andy touched upon. It's creating the right incentives. It's being able to communicate the work that you're hoping to see from them. It's rewarding them for that work. It's creating a good experience for your employees, because you'd rather pay a little bit extra now than have to spend the time to go find a new cleaner.
And which comes back to our topic. If you pay them a bit more, but then you at least make them 100% productive, it's worth it, because you're happier staff. We all know it. A cleaner, for example, who has cleaned an apartment 10 times will be much better, much quicker at it than someone new coming every week and not really sure where the difficult areas of the flat are, so it would be really, the retention is so important. So everything we talked about, cutting costs, that's definitely an area where cutting costs can, you would shoot yourself in the foot by trying to reduce the wages as much as possible.
I've got one more creative idea, Thibault, that I can throw in really quickly. And it's not my idea. I heard it at a conference I went to, an industry conference a couple of weeks ago. And there's a guy called Steve Trover in our industry who runs a company called Better Talent. And he did a session on how to attract talent. And one of the things that made me laugh, and I was like, what, you do that? And the more I thought about it, I thought it was a good idea. He has a business card. And on the business card, on one side of it, it says, "You're amazing, let's talk." And on the other side are his details. So if he's in any shop, any store, anywhere, like if he's going to a Home Depot or just get somewhere to buy light bulbs or whatever, and he gets great customer service from somebody, he whips out a card and he gives it to them. And basically what he's saying is, there's more out there than working in this job you're working in Home Depot. I can give you a much more rewarding and interesting job. Let's talk. And that's an interesting way of getting people to think about, jumping ship and joining you.
Love it. Thank you all for your questions. They're great ideas. As you can see, Andy, Matt, and Florian has way more ideas, and they can answer specific problems for you. So in an email, you're going to get a follow-up email, and the email will get there, how to contact them. And 2, you get the discounts or deals I talked about. So the details, again, any follow-up email you're going to get with a replay of this video, how to redeem this. They're 50% off some services from KeyNest, for example, 14%, 14 days free of Touchday, and Matt also free, I think, free implementation of the service for Breezeway. Thank you all for attending. We are past the time now, but you still have 24 of us present. So thank you all for this. I really appreciate that today. Thank you to, of course, the speakers, Andy from Touchday, Matt from Breezeway, and Florian from KeyNest. Yuvika, who helped me out this week. It was a busy week for me, weird week for me, and I'm so happy we delivered this for all kinds of reasons. All right, so thank you all. Thank you to the speakers, and I wish you the best. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.